My mother, she told me to get a bug out bag prepared. I have all of my documents ready, and if I have to, I have a bag in my car right now, and I'll just grab my dog and try to get to the border.
This is the Q Dropped podcast. Stories of relationships torn apart by QAnon. Today, we visit the state of Missouri, where Republicans, largely fueled by conspiracy theories about drag queens and trans people, have just passed legislation that will limit a minor's access to gender-affirming care. The legislation will also ban transgender athletes from competing on school teams as the gender they identify as. Missouri is not alone in passing these types of transphobic laws. In the United States, in 2023, the Trans Legislation Tracker is monitoring 541 anti-trans bills. As of this recording, these bills exist in 49 states. 69 of them have passed, 101 of them have failed, and 371 remain active. These bills include State Bill 129 in Oklahoma, which makes it a felony for any healthcare professional to provide gender-affirming care to a patient under the age of 26. This bill is still active. In Wyoming, Republicans introduced a bill that would make gender-affirming care for anyone younger than 18 a felony that comes with a penalty of 10 years in prison. Luckily, that one failed. Florida Bill H1521, however, has passed and prohibits entering a restroom or change room that doesn't coincide with your assigned gender at birth. It also limits access to certain services, including domestic violence shelters, to people assigned female at birth, regardless of their current gender identity. In Ohio, a bill has been introduced to ban crucial gender-affirming care for trans kids and requires mental health professionals to report on their transgender patients. In Utah, a similar bill has passed banning gender-affirming care for transgender youth who have not undergone other extensive mental health treatments first. These are just a handful of the 541 bills that have been introduced in states across America in 2023 alone. Gender-affirming care refers to medical, psychological, and social support provided to individuals to align their physical characteristics, gender identity, and overall well-being. It aims to help transgender and gender-diverse individuals feel more comfortable and affirmed in their self-identified gender. This form of care is important because the overwhelming consensus in the scientific community is that gender-affirming care prevents suicide, depression, anxiety, and other major mental health concerns. Of course, this is backed by a considerable amount of evidence. According to data, a whopping 82% of transgender people have considered killing themselves. An unbelievable 40% have attempted to take their own lives. These are not numbers we can live with. This is not okay. And gender-affirming care is how we address it. The U.S. Transgender Survey, conducted in 2015 with a sample size of over 27,000 transgender respondents, found that access to gender-affirming healthcare, including hormone therapy and gender-affirming surgeries, was associated with lower levels of psychological distress and suicidal ideation. Transgender individuals who had undergone hormone therapy or gender-affirming surgeries reported significantly lower rates of suicidal ideation compared to those who desired but had not received such care. A study published in JAMA Surgery in 2018 examined the association between gender-affirming surgeries and mental health outcomes among transgender individuals in Sweden. The study followed individuals who had undergone gender-affirming surgeries over a 10-year period and found that the likelihood of being diagnosed with a mood or anxiety disorder substantially decreased after receiving gender-affirming surgery. In 2020, a study published in JAMA Psychiatry examined the association between gender-affirming care and suicide risk among transgender individuals in Sweden. The study found that transgender individuals who accessed gender-affirming hormonal and surgical interventions had significantly lower rates of suicide compared to those who did not access such care. A systematic review published in The Lancet in 2016 analyzed 25 different studies on the mental health outcomes of transgender individuals who had undergone gender-affirming hormone therapy. The review found a significant decrease in symptoms of depression and anxiety following hormone therapy, suggesting its positive impact on mental health. So we know several things. 1. Transgender people experience suicidal ideation at a rate alarmingly higher than cisgender individuals. 2. Transgender people attempt to take their own lives at a rate significantly higher than cisgender individuals. 3. We know how to treat this, and this treatment is backed by mountains of evidence. The treatment is backed by the World Health Organization, the Association of American Medical Colleges, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and most medical associations across the globe. We have a mental health crisis in a specific population, and we know how to treat it. And Republicans are going out of their way to limit access to that treatment. What the hell is going on? Why would anyone want to get in the way of providing crucial care to individuals at risk? The answer is, of course, the perfect mix of conspiracy theories, science denial, and bigotry. Sadly, our guest today has had to face it in his own home from his own father. Before we jump in, I'd like to give you a bit of a trigger warning. You're going to hear some transphobia and bigotry towards drag queens in this episode. And just a heads up, you can get an ad-free version of this episode on Patreon, as well as updates from my own family and bonus clips from each episode, some of which are video, so you can see what some of our interviewees look like. I'll also be posting the talk I gave at the We Can Reason conference I spoke at a couple of weekends ago. Thank you so much to those of you who came out and listened to me speak. It was so great to meet you. I was so nervous, but I got such a warm reception, so many thanks. I recently had the pleasure of talking to Kodiak, who is a transgender man in Missouri currently living anxiously, waiting to find out just how bad the anti-trans legislation is going to get in his state before he up and leaves.
Well, the one major thing right now is that the legislation has decided that children and adults, because it used to be just children, cannot have access to gender-affirming care. And what that means now is that you can only have access if any other sort of mental illness has been addressed and has been resolved. You cannot have access to gender-affirming care if you have autism. You cannot have access to it if you have anxiety or depression, which I don't know any millennial that doesn't have either of those two. And I'm lucky enough, I live close enough to the Kansas border that I can just jump across the state line to my doctor, which I was told by my doctor, they're actually having all of their lawyers basically shield up for anything that comes out, and they'll fight to keep protecting their patients, but it's kind of all in limbo right now for other people that aren't lucky enough to live near the border that may have to travel hours for care. And then also our Attorney State General has, which it's been taken down now, thanks to a lot of Gen Z, he had a site posted on the state website of the Missouri state website that was basically, if you suspect anyone of being transgender, report them here.
Kodiak is referring to a tip line launched by Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, which was a form on his website to report on gender-affirming care providers in the state. With legislation recently passing that limits access to gender-affirming care, what this tip line would really be is a way to snitch on doctors providing crucial, scientifically backed care to people who are at risk. It feels like the Nazis urging citizens to turn in their Jewish neighbors as the Holocaust ramped up in 1940s Germany. But Kodiak's story didn't start there.
I was born in Bremerton, Washington on a naval base, and I lived there till I was like 5, moved to the deep south of Louisiana until right after 9/11. And then after that, I've been in Missouri since. Graduated good old public high school in 2010. And since then, I've just kind of been working, and I'm actually changing jobs now. I used to work at an animal shelter as a facility technician. So I got to keep all the heat and lights on for all the dogs and cats. So that was fun. But yeah, now I'm just getting ready to move to another job, and hopefully that kind of gives me a better financial situation, but also gives me an opportunity to move if need be.
As a child, Kodiak didn't have much of a relationship with his father.
When I was a kid, it was really just me and my mom because my dad was in the Navy. He was a sonar technician on submarines. So, very, very technical, very kind of secret. He was in the Navy in, I guess, the Cold War era. So, very, very secret and all that. So for a long time, it was just me and my mom. And then he got out of the Navy when I was about 4. And then we moved down to Louisiana. And from there, he worked with this Norwegian company. And he was based out in Norway for years at a time. So I would only see him like maybe 10 days out of a year. And he did that till I was like 9 or 10, like right up until 9/11 happened.
But what he does remember of his dad in those days was good.
When he was home, though, it was really cool. It was really fun. And I remember a really good memory of one of the times he did come home was when the PlayStation 2 console came out. And he got a whole week to spend at home. And I don't remember sleeping a single day because all we were doing was playing Legend of Zelda and all the video games that we could buy at the time. So, I mean, when I was a kid, that was so awesome. It was so cool. Like, he's the one who got me into video games and just all sorts of stuff.
His father has always been smart.
Even when we moved up to Missouri, he started working as a telecom technician. So right now, he also runs the biggest, well, I want to say runs, but he authorizes and determines what construction needs to be done for one of the largest cell carriers in North America. So again, a very technical minded, very smart kind of person.
Like any normal kid, Kodiak didn't always see eye to eye with his father.
We would butt heads because I'm the only child. And of course, whenever you get a child that turns into a teenager, we know everything and our parents are stupid and just kind of typical stuff. We always would butt heads, but we were always very, friends. Like, I could count on my dad for things and he could, say, oh, you're my buddy, you're my this, you're that. And so it was pretty cool.
As a family, Kodiak and his parents weren't all that religious.
I mean, living in Louisiana, very much surrounded by the Southern Baptism, and I did go to a after school thing just because, my mom taught at the church. She was, I guess kind of like a daycare teacher setting. She took care of babies. That's all I remember. And the after school thing, we got left with the kind of the teenagers of the group. They'd be like, oh, we'll watch Jesus films and all this kind of stuff, and we'll just talk about Jesus and yada yada. But I would say the one time I even remember going to church, it was, I don't know, I watched someone get baptized, and that's about it. I mean, we didn't really ever go. My dad had always been, he said he believed in God, but he never ever, like, I never heard him pray. We never prayed at dinner. We didn't do any of that. I mean, the only times we ever actually prayed was when my great grandmother would be over for dinner. And then she would lead a prayer, but she was, just run of the mill Christian.
When Kodiak told his parents he was transgender, his father only wanted to know that he was safe.
Honestly, it was surprising. My mom had a bigger reaction than he did. When I was going through high school, I had no idea that trans was even a thing. Before 2010, YouTube was still a new thing. And when I came out, my mom was like, oh, you're going to send me the loony bin and all that, because I had come out as bi, I came out as a lesbian, and then I came out as trans. So I was like, well, okay, 3 strikes. I think I think I figured it out now. And when I told him, it was really surprising, because he was just sitting there and he was like, okay, well, as long as you just keep yourself safe. I was like, that's it.
This lack of reaction was a relieving surprise for Kodiak, considering his father's politics.
I mean, my dad's always been a heavy Republican, like, ever since I was a kid, even when I remember who George Bush Sr. was, like, he was always like, we always vote Republican, we vote this, Democrats are bad, they kill our troops, they this, they that. So I've always kind of knew it was like, well, I don't think people are all bad. There's good people. But the moment it hit was the whole 2016 election, Hillary and Trump. And that was my second election, because I got to vote for Obama's second term. But when Hillary and Trump, I wasn't really into politics. They weren't kind of a really big deal. But when that happened, I had come out as trans, and, I saw the Republican side. They were like, oh, gay people are bad, they're this, they're that. And I was like, I don't think I can really vote for people that think I'm inherently evil for just being me.
As for his father's reasons for remaining a Republican despite having a transgender son, Kodiak said they never made much sense.
I'd be like, hey, Dad, what are your reasons for wanting to vote this way or that way? And it was always, well, Hillary's responsible for Benghazi. She killed all these troops, and Obama mocked them, and it's, oh, okay, well, why are you voting for Trump? Well, he's not a politician. He's going to shake it up. He's not this, he's that. It's like, okay, but what about what he's saying about gay people? Well, that's not true. Can you elaborate? No. Just that's not true. Take it as fact. So when Trump was elected president, I actually woke up that morning. I was bawling, because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if, me and my friends who happen to fall underneath the LGBT umbrella, or, if we're going to be safe, or, what's going to happen. And my dad pulled me aside and he was like, I'll protect you. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's going to happen. You're fine. It's just the Democrats trying to scare you. And fast forward to now. Now we've got the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Matt Gaetz and the Lauren Boeberts, which, do not ask me how she is even in office, but it all started downhill in 2016.
Kodiak noticed that his father's politics would become increasingly divisive.
Then he just kind of got a little more angry when people started talking politics. Like, it even got to the point where his friends couldn't start talking politics around him because he just got vicious. Like, just would call them stupid and moronic, any name in the book, and be like, well, you're just a damn liberal. And it's like, yeah.
But he tried to understand his dad.
At the beginning, I'd be like, I would listen in onto some of the podcasts that he would listen to just because I'm like, what even is this? And a lot of the stuff that they would talk about would be personal wellness and alternative medicine, med beds, things like that. And it's just kind of like they just encompass everything in that can trigger someone to be fearful about their own life. So people are really scared about their own health. They're scared about their finances. So what better way than to lure people in than to be like, hey, I have these great alternatives that doctors don't like because that's money out of their pocket. Yeah, so like he's got all of these vials of things. Like some of them are actually legit, like CBD stuff, but then some of them are like these kooky oils that I'm just like, are you cooking something? Are you making candles? I don't understand what is this? And like I'm not religious at all. I'm more spiritual. I have like a Thor's hammer and stuff. I'm more alternate. And so like I have a book about plants and old apothecary stuff and things like that because I have a lot of friends that do witchy stuff. So they just give me books. And so I have a book about plants and about oils that can be extracted from these plants. And so I've actually taken these books and looked at these things just to make sure he's not taking something dangerous. Like one of these things that someone was trying to push on him had, I think it was a belladonna extract. And I was like, Dad, that will kill you. Like that is a poisonous plant. Do not take anything with that. He's like, oh, okay, whatever.
Kodiak would continue to push back on his father's ideas, even when it became uncomfortable.
I think it was like maybe 2019, 2018 maybe, a topic of abortion came up just in our house. And he had said something, along the lines of, I don't think it should happen. I think it's just a scapegoat for immoral women or whatever. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, Dad, you understand that if someone doesn't like me and they find out what I am, I'm still, I could still potentially have need to access abortion care.
Kodiak's dad had been drinking that night and didn't take to being challenged very well.
He got in my face and was basically telling me to shut up. And, I put my hands up kind of like, hey, I'm not saying anything. I'm, just voicing my own concern. And he goes, you better put your fucking hands down right now or else I'm going to beat the crap out of you. And like, yeah, I was like, okay. My mom jumped in and was, yelling at us to both stop or whatever. And, I was like, I'm just going away for a minute. And I didn't talk to him for, I think, 5 days after that. And he acted like nothing was said or nothing happened or anything. So at that point, I was just kind of like, I don't really feel like I can trust you with any of my concerns now. I'm always trying to be like upbeat, optimistic kind of a person. I'm very, very world savvy. So I know that, if things happen, I can take care of myself. I'm very aware of my surroundings. So, do I think anything like that's going to happen? No, but there's always that possibility. And if that possibility becomes a reality, then I would like to, be able to take care of myself afterwards. Or if, God forbid, that happens to any of my friends that are cis women or people who identify as women or anyone that has a uterus, I will hope that they can have some sort of access to take care of themselves. And it just kind of really threw me off because, a long time ago, my mom had told me that she needed one because she had, in, I think it was her early days of high school, she got raped and she went to an OBGYN and, because she was concerned that she would need an abortion. and I didn't say anything to my dad at the time, but I looked at my mom and I was like, so what would he say about you? And I don't know if she ever told him that story or what, but, it's not my place to tell that story, and it's not my place to bring it up in an argument just to win an argument. But, it just kind of is like, I don't think he really looks outside of his own little echo chamber whenever he talks about stuff like that.
Kodiak's father has taken up some concerning hobbies.
He has 3 full to the brim gun safes now. Like, I own my own firearms. I own 2, and I understand, the need to have protection for yourself, but I use mine as target shooting, like for competition. Like, I want to say the most high-powered weapon I have is a little revolver that can only shoot 6 bullets at a time. But he owns, I think, 3 AK-47s. He's always taught me about like firearm safety, and whenever I was a kid, there was never a weapon that was unlocked in the house. They were always behind some sort of code lock or triple door safe. So there was never, a doubt in my mind that if someone got in the house, they'd be able to, access those. I was talking to him about the young kid in Kansas City that was just shot by a guy, and it turns out my mom's a bus driver. He used to ride her bus like a few years ago. So she was devastated over that. And I was just kind of like, Dad, because the Second Amendment's like a super touchy subject here. I was like, I don't think there should be an outright ban, but I do think there needs to be better background checks. I was like, because the last weapon I bought, there was no check. They just made sure I was over 18. They didn't, check to see if I had any sort of criminal record or anything like that. So I was just kind of like, I think there does need to be some sort of better system. I was like, if I have to go through a background check to buy a car, surely I should have to do that in order to buy a weapon that could hurt somebody. But, he just kind of was like, well, if you think that one underlying incident means that people can just come and take our weapons, then you're not very bright. And I'm just like, that's not what I said at all. And he goes, he always has this favorite phrase of, well, when the government decides they want to come and take my guns, I'll just have to leave in a body bag because there's going to be a few of them going out that way too. I'm like, no one is coming to take them. No one. Absolutely no one. But okay. He has a genuine fear that there's going to be some FBI agent that comes door to door to take his guns. Like, that is his huge fear.
Like everyone's cues, Kodiak's father seemed to kick his conspiracy theories into high gear when the pandemic hit.
He thought it wasn't going to be a big deal. In the beginning, he thought it was just a strain of flu. And then he thought it was a Chinese attack because it came out of China and it was from their lab. Contrary to any sort of other investigations, it came out of a Chinese lab. And then it was a way for the Biden administration to start population control on America, and that it wasn't really COVID. It wasn't really a sickness. It was just a method of population control.
Kodiak said his dad refused to get vaccinated for all the same reasons all of our conspiracy theorist loved ones spout, but that didn't stop him from protecting himself.
I got vaccinated myself, and so did my grandmother, my mom's mom, but she's immune compromised. So I got vaccinated for her because that is my ride or die lady. I love her to bits, and I'd do anything for her. And so I got vaccinated for her, and I didn't tell him. Like, I told my mom because I was like, hey, I'm going to go out and do this. She's like, okay. Like, my mom's not vaccinated either, but, it's whatever. But after I got vaccinated, he started talking about how, well, people who get the jab, they're going to die in 5 years. They've got this weird chemical. It's just going to deteriorate you until you just drop dead.
I always find this prediction amusing. At first, they said we would die within months. Then it was a year. Of course, when a year passed and we were all still standing, they said it was 2 years. I guess now that it's been 2 years, Kodiak's dad had to stretch that prediction to 5 years. And in 5 years, you know the drill, kids. It's going to be 10 years. These people are so practiced at the art of moving the goalposts that Lionel Messi himself couldn't score. But Kodiak's dad wasn't just scared of the vaccine. He was also vehemently against taking any sort of COVID test.
He works from home. And so he had this huge fight with his boss. He hadn't worked in an office for 7 or 8 years now. So like even before the pandemic, he didn't have to go to the office. But his boss was like, hey, if you have to come to the office, they have these new COVID guidelines and you'll have to do like just a COVID test, just a little simple test to make sure that, everyone else in the office stays safe. My dad's like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do that. So either you make me do that or you find someone else to fulfill my job that I've been doing for 20 years. I'm like, wow, really? I mean, like, I don't like the test anyways, because I've had the unfortunate of the one going way up my sinus. I don't like it as much as the next person, but if my job required it just to be in the office, it's like once every 2 weeks for us. It's like, really? But okay, yeah, throw away your 20-year career over a Q-tip in the nose. All right.
Has your dad had COVID?
No, but my mom has. She's had it twice.
Yikes. Was it relatively okay?
The first one was kind of rough for her. She lost her sense of smell for a little bit, but other than that, it was pretty mild. But, she went to the doctor and they ran I think 3 different tests on her to make sure that it was COVID, and all 3 of them came back positive. So, but after the second time she got it and she did her little self-distance thing for about 10 days until she felt better, and then she got checked again and was able to be around other people afterwards. My dad had told her, he goes, yeah, I kind of wasn't feeling great a few weeks ago either, but I just didn't say anything. So it's like, oh, so she could have got it from you. Great. Awesome.
The vaccines and the pandemic had Kodiak's dad so worked up that he continued to say hurtful things at the worst times.
I have a few friends of mine that are in the healthcare field. One of them was a first response nurse. She worked a COVID floor for about 8 months. And, I would get updates from her all the time. And when the first round of vaccines came out, she was able to get one because at the time she was about 3 months pregnant. So she qualified as at risk of COVID. So she got the vaccine. And when she got that, I told my mom, because I was like, hey, just so you know, this is going on. And my dad happened to walk in the room. He goes, well, hopefully her baby doesn't die. I'm like, yeah, real nice to say. Now she has 2 kids, but beforehand, when I first got to know her, she had the unfortunate experience of having miscarriages. So I was like, you're going to say that about a girl who's had to experience that trauma multiple times? It's like, that's awful. It's like, I don't want you to talk to her ever again, because I don't know what you're going to say to her.
It was especially confusing for Kodiak when he thought about his father's own experiences.
Both of my parents know people that are teachers that, one of my dad's best friends from the military is now a cook at an indigenous school in Alaska, and he was telling my dad about their whole situation about the Inuit population having to deal with COVID and how awful that was. But it's still like none of that goes through. And he just is like, no, it's not real. No, it's a scam. It's like, okay, but if it's not real, then why are people dying of it?
Yeah. And why did your mom have to isolate for 10 days?
Exactly.
You might not know this yet, but it's a statistic that I included in my talk at the We Can Reason conference in Calgary 2 weeks ago, which you'll be able to hear on Patreon in the coming days. The link to the sign up is in our show notes. A recent study, which will also be linked in the show notes, concluded that QAnon belief in America is actually on the rise. It's gone from 14% of the population to 18%. This statistic surprised me, even though I'm elbow deep in this crap every week. I was under the impression that QAnon belief was falling, but I was wrong. But when you think about how easily Q believers part with their money, I guess it makes sense that Q leaders would keep pushing these ideas more and more. Kodiak's father, of course, fell into many of the different financial traps found among QAnon followers, including Forex trading.
He has, that I'm aware of, he has over 35 million in Iraqi dinar. He also has, I think it's 200,000 of Vietnamese dong. And then he just bought Zimbabwe currency. He has, I think it's 2 bills for 1 trillion each in Zimbabwe currency. And I'm like, those are worthless. Those are absolutely worthless. Like, I think the last time I looked at it, the Iraqi dinar was 0.00075 to the American dollar. And I was just like, what? I look at him a couple times because he'll like stop me in the hallway and he'll be like, hey, just so you know, this shit's going down and this is happening. So, I'm looking at this house and this place. And I'm like, okay, Dad. Sure.
What is it that he thinks is happening or going to happen?
He thinks that there's this thing called the Great Reset, and it's tied to these other 2 things called Nasara and Jasara. And what is going to happen is that a very select few people in the entire world are going to flip every single country's economics, and they're going to have every single currency go back to this, what's called the gold standard. So everything's going to be backed by gold and physical value, and the fiat system is just going to go away. And how we supposedly know that's going to happen is that there's going to be this huge line of arrests of higher up officials from all over the world, and they're going to all go get locked up in Gitmo.
They've been saying that for so long. When is it going to happen?
I know. When he started talking about this, I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, that'd be nice. Who doesn't want a couple extra $1 million? Like, again, I'm a millennial. I am waiting for the housing market to just plummet. So, but I was just like, this always just seems too good to be true. So I'm going to just do my own check in on this. And I saw just article after article, even from his favored Fox News, that this had been a scam since the early 80s.
It's impossible. It's literally physically impossible to back all of the money in circulation by physical gold. There's not enough gold to do that.
No, there's not enough resources on this planet in order to make sure that every single individual has like physically backed currency. Like that's the reason the fiat system was placed.
Kodiak would push his father for more information.
I'll be like, well, I mean, why do you think this is happening? 2 years ago when he started getting in on this, I was like, well, what makes you say that? Like, why do you think this is going to happen? And all of his answers are just always, well, there's so much shit going on. It's like, okay, elaborate. Tell me what's going on. Cite your sources. And he never can. And he's just like, well, you just need to do your own research. The favorite phrase, do your own research. I'm just like, I have, and I've not found anything. So maybe you can light the way and tell me what I'm missing. He'll be like, well, the finance minister in Iraq just released this statement. So I'll literally go to the Iraq business news page and I'll look for whatever he's claiming they're talking about. And there's nothing. There's articles of them saying how it's impossible for them to raise the value of the dinar to be one-on-one with the American dollar. And they're like, they can't do that, or else they're literally going to buckle their own economy. And then everyone's going to just riot.
As if QAnon conspiracy theorists weren't already confusing enough, Kodiak's dad is, get this, a member of the Freemasons. The Freemasons. You know, the secret society that conspiracy theorists claim is involved in a secretive and influential plot to control world events, governments, and institutions. Yeah, he's a member of that little club. I laughed out loud when Kodiak told me his conspiracy theorist dad was in it.
Exactly. Their whole emblem is the Illuminati emblem. So he goes to like these twice weekly meetings, and it's mainly just him and a bunch of other 60-plus-year-old guys that sit down and talk about who knows what. But while he's gone, I live at home. And so it's me and my mom, and we sit and we chit chat and we have a good time. And I just kind of look at her at one point and I'm like, what do you even think? She goes, I don't know. I have no idea. She goes, I just keep my mouth shut and I just let him say what he says, and I just nod and play my games, because she has like her little tablet games. So I think she knows that it's all BS, but she just to keep the peace within their own marriage, she just kind of lets him go on whatever tangent.
In recent months, right alongside the anti-trans legislation that has popped up in nearly every state, there's been a clear and undeniable war on drag. Drag queens, more so than drag kings, have become a political scapegoat. They've been labeled groomers, and armed protests have popped up outside of drag queen story hours and other drag events. Drag queens across the country live in fear of violence and discrimination, and Kodiak's father has hopped right on the drag queen hate train. And that became apparent one night when he joined his parents for dinner with old friends.
When we were at dinner, there was a lot of drinks going around, and I had like maybe one beer because I just don't drink. And when we were heading home, something was said on the radio about Hamburger Mary's, actually, that drag restaurant. And my dad just kind of made this sound, and, I let it go the rest of the drive. And I was like, I don't know what that was about, but whatever. I'm just going to let it go. And then we get back to the house, and he pulls me into his office, and he starts talking about the dinar. And I was like, Dad, I don't really, kind of trying to put it lightly. I was like, if I get something physical in my hands, then I'll believe it. But right now, I'm just skeptic about it. And he goes, well, of course you're skeptic. You believe all these liberal things. And that's when he started in on, you don't believe that teachers are giving kids hormones in kindergarten, and, that drag queens are wearing dildos to school in front of kids. And I'm like, okay, this is point proof that you've never met a drag queen, because you know that they won't wear dildos, because then what's the point of them having to tuck and everything? And I'm just like, where is this logic coming from? And I was like I just flat out looked around. I was like, that's not happening. It's like, those things do not happen. And he goes, I have proof. I can pull up video evidence right now. And I was like, do it. Show me. Because I can pull up videos of people from this evening at a drag show, and nothing is happening. He goes, well, then why do they act like strippers at bars? And I was like, because that's at a bar. I was like, do you see 5-year-olds at a bar? I was like, if you do, there's a problem with those parents. It's like, but there are no kids at any of those shows. And I was like, as for the whole nurses giving kids hormones, I was like, nurses can't even give their kids ibuprofen. They have to call the parents first. And I was like, it took me how long to get on hormones, Dad? I was like, do you really think that these individuals at schools who are being paid pennies have the ability to just start slinging medical grade stuff at kids? And he goes, well, I don't believe that kids should be on hormone blocker. And I was like, I referred to one of my friends, and I was like, you realize that he had to be on these because he was growing too fast and his bones were brittle, right? I was like, there's a bunch of cis kids that have to be put on this stuff because of other reasons than they're confused about what identity they have. And, he just, kept barking back and forth like I didn't know what I was talking about. And he goes, you know what? I'm just done talking to you. I have no respect for you anymore. I was like, cool. Awesome. So that's kind of where that conversation died. I was just like, okay, Dad.
Aside from this being a horrifically transphobic way to treat your transgender child, his father was also attacking the drag community, which is a community that means a great deal to Kodiak.
I have two really good friends of mine that I've known since we moved here, and one runs a place called Hamburger Mary's here. And the entire staff, they all dress either in drag or they're openly gay or lesbian. It's just like this little... and it's hilarious. It's a giant purple building in the middle of this city, and you literally cannot have a bad time there. It's just all love and inclusivity. And one of my friends runs this place, and he's like, he identifies as a cis gay man, but he dresses in drag, and he's really good at it. And it's amazing because he's even scared of flies. Like he can't hurt anybody. So it just surprises me so much. I've probably had better conversations with a drag queen than I have anyone else in my family, really.
Kodiak feels disrespected by his father.
They love telling the story that I am their miracle kid because I wasn't supposed to happen. My mom, when she was 18, was told by naval doctors that she wouldn't be able to have kids. And so until I think they were 28, 29 years old, so about 10 years later, poof, here I am. So, they always like to tell that story of how I'm such a miracle kid, but then behind closed doors, I have no respect for you. You just think like a liberal. You're this, you're that. It's like, cool. Okay. Whatever suits your situation.
It's frustrating for Kodiak when his mom doesn't stand up for him.
My mom is a very tender-hearted lady, and she likes to brag that I get my tender heart from her. So she's not a confrontational person at all. She would rather sing Kumbaya and be friends with everybody. That is her to a T. Like all of my friends, every single one of my friends from school, that's their mom. That's their second mom, is my mom. And if anyone ever needed anything, they always came here, and they would just go right up to mom, and she would help them. And even one of my friends who lost their own mom, the first person she told was my mom. So, my mom is like this big, gentle heart that everyone can go to if they need somebody. And I think in order for her to keep her own mental health okay, she just kind of blocks stuff off that my dad does. So, like I said, it does disappoint me a little bit, but I totally understand it, and I'm not mad for her at all about it.
I asked Kodiak what he thought his father might be getting out of all of this.
I think, one, it solidifies that his fears are valid, that the government's coming in to take control of everybody, and they're trying to do whatever they can to eliminate the good guys, whoever those are. And at some point, I think it's also his ego that's not letting him out of this spiral, because my dad's always been a very I have to be right in every conversation type of guy. And I don't know if that's because he just has so much pride. Like, when I say my dad was smart, he was very educationally smart. And like in 9th grade, he was in senior class trigonometry. And then he was creating sonar for the U.S. Navy. And I think him just being in those positions was just kind of like in his brain, I'm the smartest person here, so everyone has to listen to me. Everyone should listen to me and take every word that I say as fact and not question me at all. So I think it's fear and ego that are just keeping him in this.
Kodiak has found his groove and copes with everything well.
I play a lot of online games, so I'm able to decompress and just kind of deal with things. And I've got good friends that I can talk to, so there's ways out of it. And plus, like I said, I used to work at an animal rescue, so it's hard to have a bad day when you're surrounded by dogs and cats. And so there's always ways to kind of just mentally check out of where I'm at.
He says that when you're faced with a QAnon loved one, your own mental health should always come first.
Really just do what you can to keep your mental health okay. If that is, going out with friends or playing online video games or whatever it is that makes you happy, do that. If you're in a place that you can get away from whoever in your life is in this rabbit hole, do that. If it's not safe for you, like if you live with that person, just keep your guard up, really. Because, some people may be a little more prone to physical violence or mental attacks if they're, put in a situation where they feel like they've been proven wrong. Just keep yourself as safe as possible. And, always put your mental health first.
Unfortunately for Kodiak, his mental health isn't the only concern. Faced with increasing transphobia literally being written into state law, he fears for his safety and the safety of his friends in the LGBTQ plus community.
Unfortunately, if you look at the steps to genocide, we're at step 7 of 10. And that's not just, trans people. If trans people go down, that just makes it easier for them to go after the gays and anybody that is non-binary or identifies as queer in any way. They've already gone after women. So there's really no stop to them until they reach white man utopia.
How does it make you feel that your dad is essentially on the side of all of this? He votes Republican, right?
Oh yeah, not a doubt.
Do you think he understands how this affects you?
It makes me nuts, honestly. Because when I was growing up, the big bads of, America was North Korea, Putin, and, anyone that had the same ideals as Hitler. And he would always, always, always tell me, well, you need to learn history because if you don't, you're doomed to repeat it. And I was like, this is so ironic that you are following these footsteps of basically Mein Kampf. You are following this exact path to be a Nazi. And when Black Lives Matter was around, they're still around, but whenever the riots were happening in 2020, I was in one of those protests, and me and my buddy, we were actually trying to leave because it was getting later in the day. And the cops were like, hey, if you don't leave, we're going to arrest you all right now. And so we're like, okay, well, let's pack up. We'll regroup later. And there was actually a can of tear gas that got launched into our group. And from the police report, it was a flawed can of tear gas and it exploded. And it actually hit my buddy right underneath his eye. And he had to get like 20 stitches on his face from the shrapnel. And my dad, because I went to the hospital with my buddy, when I came back a few days later, my dad goes, well, why the fuck were you around that Antifa crowd? I was like, Antifa means anti-fascist. What? I was like, you are so proud of your military heritage and people fighting in World War II against Nazis. They were anti-fascists. Why are you so mad about it? That was another fight, and that ended up with me actually getting kicked out of the house for a week.
I asked him what he worried about most going forward.
My mother, she told me to get a bug out bag prepared. I have all of my documents ready, and if I have to, I have a bag in my car right now, and I'll just grab my dog and try to get to the border. There had been conversations with my mom where I told her, I would be angry at him for what he said, and then I would talk to her and be like, if it came down to it, I believe that he would sell me out in order to keep his rights to a firearm.
Thank you so much to Kodiak for sitting down and telling us your story. It breaks my heart to see the wildfire of transphobia burn out of control in the US, and I hope that things don't get any worse. I hope we start to see all of this die down, so that transgender Americans don't have to have a bug-out plan, and they can remain in their hometown with their loved ones and the care they need. I want my transgender listeners to know I see you, you are valid, and you make the world way more colorful. We need you. If you or anyone you know is having thoughts of self-harm, please reach out to the suicide hotline at 1-833-456-4566 in Canada and 988 in the United States. We'd like to ask our listeners to rate and review this podcast so we can reach more people. Also, you can sign up to hear my talk at the We Can Reason conference and get access to ad-free versions of all episodes and bonus clips from many of them. The link to our Patreon is in the show notes. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the next episode, so make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform to be notified when that goes live. Thanks for listening.